All right. Hi, everyone. First, I want to just, welcome you to this presentation. It's going to be a quick, informative presentation, and I would strongly recommend that when you try all these techniques and strategies yourself, just refer back to the notes. There's a lot to give you all about hardware and the software and how we can turn that into communication also. Don't be scared that I'm a speech therapist teaching all about switch accessibility. I do have my ATP, and I earned that through an extra certificate program, an occupational therapy program at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And now I teach assistive tech and instructional tech courses for both them, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and Aurora University. So this is a lot of information coming to you from Illinois, actually. There's two.
Uh-oh, Megan. I think you must have somehow hit mute.
I did. I was very excited. There's two parts to this presentation. I hope I didn't miss too much of the introduction. There's two parts to the presentation. The first chunk is going to focus on the hardware, how we can make switches connect to the iPad, because there are quite a few different options. And then the second part is going to work on actually programming it. Just to give you a little taste, this is just a 1-minute video that I've handed out to my teachers in some of my buildings, and here's what we do to read books.
This is a quick tutorial on using Epic with switch control to turn the pages. Right now, our Hitch 2 is set up on the orange level with a switch programmed into the left arrow and a switch plugged into the right arrow. This will be our turn pages left and right. Go ahead and open up Epic. Click on Epic. I recommend starting with a Read to Me book. I'm going to go with 5 Little Monkeys as an example. The book will automatically start to read when it is opened. In order to make this switch accessible, all you need to do is triple click 1, 2, 3 on the home, and you will see that the iPad basic switch recipe will launch. At that time, all our students have to do are click their switches to turn the pages, and they can turn the pages back. If they want to hear a certain page read over and over again, they can just do that by switching back and forth.
So in order to make that happen, there definitely is some background programming. But when it comes to implementation for the parents at home or the teachers in the classroom, all they have to do, like I said, is the triple click and the functionality is there. So I'll teach you all the programming behind that once we get switches hooked up, and some even more intense programming. That is just kind of a taste of what we're actually working for here. Okay, so I am going to start with a slight disclaimer, not the financial one, but what I'm going to tell you right now is that the hardware items I'm showing you are just some options, and I found them all to work. There's additional options out there, so this is not the end all be all. I'm just going to take a couple as a deep dive, but you may have something else. Some of the things I'm going to show you are off brands or kind of things that we've just made work. So, they've been working since like iOS 13, and we're up to 16 and 17 now, so they might not always work, but they've been pretty good for a while. Also, I am a speech therapist, but believe it or not, I have not tried every single switch accessible communication out there. So I will touch on one of them towards the end of the presentation, but this is mainly just showing you how to make an iPad accessible for some of those kids that the built-in accessibility features just doesn't cut it. So here's our deep dive. I'm going to go over the Bluetooth switch and a little bit of Hook Plus. Those are both from AbleNet. The Don Johnson Switch Interface Pro and the Hitch 2. So the first one, this is the Bluetooth switch. There's a picture there, but I also have one here. It's a classic. You can still purchase it from AbleNet. The positives to this system of access is it's wireless. You can plug 2 switches in, and you can actually program up to 6 or 10 different functions for the iPad. And I'm going to get into that, of all the functions for the iPad, like all the commands that we can program. So I'll get to that. And it will definitely work with all iPads. Limitations are you definitely have to have batteries to be charged. There's an extra step to make sure that it's connected to the iPad because of the Bluetooth connectability. and it only has 2 switch ports, which sounds funny, but I have some programming where you can hook up 3 or more switches at a time. So that opens up a lot of possibilities for using iPad apps. And I guess to quote Alton Brown, this is a unitasker, like it can only be used for Bluetooth switch accessibility. If you want to learn more about the Bluetooth and how it works, here is the link to the actual AbleNet video on it. I'm not going to show it all to you, but
The Bluetooth switch features a rechargeable battery connection on your iPad.
How to connect it. So if you have one of these, if this is the hardware you choose to go with, go ahead and watch that video. It'll help you set it up and help you utilize it to its fullest potential. The next one I have is called the AbleNet Hook Plus. The reason I'm still mentioning this was actually Apple approved, where it has the lightning adapter and the ability to charge the iPad or charge while it's connected, which is nice, where a lot of other things can't. And it was actually Apple approved, except they just stopped making it less than a year ago. So this would be already, if you own it, you can use it. There's a link here. There's a video if you own one. There's 4 ports in this one, which is nice. The first 2 ports automatically configure to do the next select, like the 2 switch step scanning. So this video, again, it's here, the iOS Hook Plus switch interface, the auto configuration. Watch that video if you haven't, this link, which is nice, but you can also erase that programming and put in 4 switches, 4 different functions. And I know I'm talking about all these functions and I haven't told you about it yet, but I kind of got to do it in this order. So sorry if I keep promising all this great stuff at the end. So again, the positives of the Hook Plus, it's the quickest one to just plug in and go. There's less programming needed. You can plug in 4 switches. You do not need a battery to use it, which is nice because most of the time, I don't know about you with your students, but many of my students don't even have their iPads charged, let alone have the Bluetooth switch adapter charged. This one can actually wake up a sleeping iPad. So if somebody is using this for communication or access, if the iPad has gone idle or gone to sleep, pressing a switch on this will wake it up. That's one of their advertisements. You can use a Bluetooth keyboard at the same time. So that allows you to hook up 2 different things. And like I said, it is Apple approved. Limitations, obviously, again, it's discontinued and only 4 switches, which I know again sounds crazy, but yes, believe it or not, when we get to it, only 4 switches can be a limitation. So now I'm going to get into the more fun stuff. Those were just kind of the honorable mentions. Next we have is the Don Johnston Switch Interface Pro. This again, I hate to tell you this, it's no longer available to purchase, but don't worry, I'm going to end with the one you really can purchase too. You can, like I said, you can get the Bluetooth adapter, the first one, but for some reason, my school district had like 20, 30, 40 of these sitting around. So if anybody recognizes this, if you used a lot of these out in Colorado, you can use this to your potential for hooking up iPads. So I say, look around your school for this. And all you need to make this thing that you already own iPad accessible is a $29 little Lightning USB adapter. So does anybody in this video watching have one of these already in their possession? Go ahead and put that in the chat, just because I'm curious. I see at least one person smiling. Woohoo! Lots of yeses. Okay, I'm very happy that some of you have it, so I'm not wasting my time. Perfect. Yes, $29 will make this magical thing an iPad switch adapter. Woo! I'm being a white. This is fun. Okay, thanks, guys. And thanks of you that have your video on and are smiling. I appreciate that too. Okay, so I just used the regular old Apple one. Like, here's the link to it. It's not that exciting. It's just the regular old Apple camera adapter. You can try the off-brand. I just haven't tried it, but it's up to you. So what's neat about this, and here's one of my very exciting things. It is by far the most cost-effective option because you already own this. And again, it only costs $29, so it's the cheapest. And it allows you to plug in multiple switches and program a different function for each one of those switches. So out of all the options I'm showing you guys, actually has the most flexibility for the student or parent, since the switch interface, this one lets you have the most programmable switches. You can actually program up to 18 different functions. I've never done that many. I've never gone over, say, like 5 or 6 myself, but you know, if you are loving it, you could do it. But again, my favorite part of this is if this is something that's used at school, but then sent home, not only can it allow the student to access their iPad for, say, communication or activities or whatever else, it allows flexibility because parents can just unplug this, go take it over to their computer that they have at home, and use on the blue level, there's a space and enter. Space bar is play and pause on YouTube, and the click, if you do like the space bar or the enter, the click, you can go to the next song. I explained that very poorly, but basically, if you have the keyboard function of the space bar, it will play and pause YouTube, and then you take your cursor and hover it over the next song button to click on YouTube. So anytime the student hits the switch, that's the click, it'll go to the next song. Anytime they hit the space bar switch, it'll play and pause. It just gives them another cause effect activity to do at home, utilizing the same items they already have. So like I said, you can program 18 different switches or functions. And it will also work with the USB-C, like the iPad Pro camera adapter. Like this is the Lightning adapter, but I also tested it with an iPad Pro, and it did work. The only limitation that I have right now is that you cannot charge the iPad at the same time that you're using this because it is a physical plug-in, but it's never really been a problem for me. Like it's still worth it, I guess. And if you are going to utilize all like the function, it definitely does take some programming and organization, but I'm going to be honest, anything on the iPad takes some programming and organization if you're using switches. And like I said, I know I got a lot of yeses in there that you guys have them. Again, this one's only an option if you already own it. So I'm excited for you guys that own it, but don't worry, don't fret. If you don't own it, here is your solution. This is my for real favorite solution. It is called the Hitch 2. Let me do some unplugging here because I have it right next to me. You can obviously see the picture right next to you, but this is the Hitch 2. It can be purchased from AbleNet. I'm not working for them. It just so happens that this is what my district has purchased. And during COVID, we bought this switch interface for $120. And we bought this $20-ish 3-prong adapter from iPad. I do not know why, but I swear that single prong camera adapter did not work, but for some reason, the 3-prong one does. Again, don't know why, just take advantage of the fact that I spent too much time during COVID to figure this out. And there's the link to Amazon right there if you want to purchase it. This is the official Apple one, which I just purchased like a week ago, and it works perfectly fine. I also in the past purchased an off-brand one that was like $2 cheaper, and it actually worked too. But for some reason, the 3-port one does work. So take advantage. And again, it gives you the same. Let's go through our positives and our limitations. It is very cost effective because it's only $140. When you compare that to the Bluetooth switch, the first one I mentioned, that's like 200 or something. This option is cheaper. And again, it gives you the flexibility where you can use it as a computer switch interface, or you can use it as an iPad switch interface, which is my favorite part. Has anybody, I know there's going to be some more yeses, but has anybody actually owned this Hitch 2 already or have something around? Go ahead and put that in the chat real quick. Or looking to buy it if this is the actual option you can buy. Okay, at least we got some yeses on that one too. Perfect. So fabulous. This will work for all of you, and I'll teach you everything you need to know about it. Just stick with me another 45 minutes. I promise to make it entertaining. So again, I love the flexibility of this. Like I said, you can plug it in, and on this green level, it has the space enter or the space and the left click. The space and the left click can be used on YouTube or so many other things. A lot of programs on the computer have like a keyboard function that can work with them. So just looking at the shortcuts can sometimes make something accessible, which is nice. I guess the only limitation is that this is not technically an Apple approved way to hook up. But like I said, this has been working for me for the last the last 2, 3, 4 years. It's been working. It's still working on iOS 17, so I don't see it going away anytime soon. So it's definitely worth it. I guess the only other limitation I want to mention is technically you can only program with ease like 6 different functions or 6 different switches on the Hitch 2, because for the iPad, I guess the background information is for the iPad to recognize it as a switch, it has to be a keyboard function that's being put into it. So the space, the enter, the up, down, and left, right arrows work, but the things like the left click and right click, or the programmable ones or the mouse movements, the iPad just doesn't recognize those. So even though it looks like there's so many options on here, the only ones that work for iPad programming are those 6 main ones. But again, like I said before, I've never needed to go over 6. So this was what I purchased for my school district. And this is what we sent home. We had 30 kids almost that needed this during COVID. So this was the system that we sent home for them in my district. Okay. Things that haven't worked for me. For some reason, again, I don't know why, but this ATEC one or APTEC, whatever, I couldn't get it to work with anything. So I'm sorry if you already own this one. I couldn't figure out. Good luck to you if you do. And for some reason, it sounds crazy, but the 2-prong adapter for Apple didn't work. Like the single prong worked with the Don Johnston, and this 3rd-prong one worked with the Hitch 2, but the 2-prong one didn't work with the Hitch 2. Again, I don't know the rhyme or reason. Just trust me on this one and don't waste your time. Here's just a list over time. I've just started to collect these. Some people might own the Tapio or the Tapio or a Praetorian applicator. I've heard of the Stealth Switch before. I don't have one. I haven't heard anybody using it. RJ Cooper is a really cool company that does some really fun adaptive tools. Like there's a switch adapted guitar hero if you really want, or an MP3 player. He has a Bluetooth switch that can be used, and a Tekla. I don't know. I haven't used it. These are just some things that people had mentioned in the past of switch interfaces. So you can certainly try any of these if you want. I just haven't tried them myself. One thing I do want to mention though, right here is a nice video on some switch control options from the Tapio people. It's not necessarily, I mean, it is quote unquote selling the Tapio one, but it just kind of talks through some of the switch control options, which is nice. So I added that in. Again, remember that initial warning. I have a ton of stuff to show you, and I would just recommend going back to this PowerPoint and picking up the little spots that are helpful for you that are relevant to what you're doing. Okay, here's my last thing of hardware. I don't know what you guys use for your mounting systems, but I have found this company called Modular Hose. Really fun because they actually started as a company in the industrial manufacturing. They would have like nozzles that would spray water or vacuum, whatever. They ended up getting into assistive technology. They have flexible mounts. It's either this flexible tubing, but now in the top right-hand corner of your screen, they have logo mounts, which are a rigid mount, which I absolutely love. You can connect pieces, make it as long or as short as you want, and it's about 1/3 of the price of the other mounts out there. They have different connectors for the top. So some students, I have it at their desk and it's working like almost like an easel. They just put their communication device on, and this bottom clamp, they have some spring clamps like that, but they also have some that you can crank and attach to the desk leg that will never, ever, ever move, or attach to the wheelchair. It is just the most cost-effective, easiest to use mounting tool I've ever used. I don't know, has anybody, I know we're going to get some yeses or nos. Has anybody ever tried this? Anybody in the audience gone to this before? Oh, that's okay. As you can see, like right here, here's that real hard clamp one. And again, the prices are about a third of the price. You can get one of these for easily, you know, in the 150, under $200 range, which I know sounds insane, but for us, for mounts, it's actually a pretty good deal. I also like the flexible mounts when I'm doing switch placement assessments, because it's easy to, oh, move it here, now move it here, now move it there. And then when we find a really good placement, sometimes we'll get the more rigid mounts and make it more permanent. But it's just been a very, very good tool in my toolbox. Okay. Any questions on that? I know I took 20 minutes to go through 20 different options, but I just wanted to throw it at you quick before we get into the programming. So if you have a question, go ahead and type it in real quick, and I'll wait 2 seconds before I move on. All right. Either we have a lot of people just listening and saving it for later, or you guys actually understand my fast talking. So I will take either one as an okay. Okay. All right. Now to the programming. I am going to mention all of these really quickly, like a 1-switch automatic scanning, a 2-switch step scanning, and then we'll get into the really interesting programming of the gestures, custom gestures, and recipes. So this is a link. Again, I swear I don't work for AbleNet. I've just really enjoyed a lot of their resources. AbleNet back in the day for iOS 14 made this, they call it like the missing user guide, which kind of talks through some of the built-in accessibility features. It is still true for iOS 16 and 17. So even though it says 14, everything they talked about still exists. So I just put that link in there. If you have a student who has the cognition and the timing and the movement and the ability to understand that you click something and then it sends you to another menu to decide if you want to click or hold or swipe or pinch or, you know, scroll. Like if they are able to use the built-in accessibility features, I think it's great. I don't have many students that can. So that's why, just through the nature of my caseload, kind of had to learn something else. But in the table of contents for this, it talks about AbleNet switch interface option, but it also talks about how to configure like the single switch auto scan, the single switch step scan, and the dual switch step scan, like the two switch step scanning. So that's a really good guide if you just want to use what's already built into iOS. And with the auto scanning, it talks about the pause on the first item or how many loops before you start over again. You can create one function for a quick little, I got lots of stuff. You can make one function for just a tap, just a click on your switch, or another one for a long hold. Like a long press can be one function on the iPad, where a tap can be a different function. So that's another way to almost like double the functionality of the iPad. Again, though, my students that I was speaking to weren't able to differentiate between the long pause, or physically they couldn't do a tap and a long pause. So I had to search for other options. And I think some of you probably have had to search for other options for accessibility too. So again, remember I talked about the Tapio had a nice video about some of the functions. Here's a link to it again. It's just it talks through the built-in accessibility features for switch scanning. Okay, and again, if you have a student who can handle everything and is capable, that's awesome. Here is a little video for inspiration. So just watch this for a second, because this is what it can do in its fullest potential.
All right. There's a lot going on, folks, but I'm called old school. I'm called direct access. So what I'm going to do is explain some buttons and show you some things. Okay, so give me a second here.
You can see he's scanning through.
All right, starting from my left to right, I have buttons. And I'm going to use my tongue, and now you just all got to handle it. Button number 1. It's called move back, move previous. Okay? Middle button, or second button. Select. All right? Third button. Move next. Okay, get all that? Another button on this side for the wheelchair. Another button, wheelchair. Another button, volume down, volume up. Whoop whoop for long press. Water straw for drinking.
Oh, also, if you notice his water straw, it's that flexible movement, like that modular hose. That modular hose and Mogo mounting people that I gave you a link to, they have a water bottle with a flexible straw and a valve to hold the water in the straw so that it's easy for nourishment. So that's kind of cool too. You guys can watch the rest of this video if you want. He's hilarious. He makes a joke even that it's water, not vodka. You know, he's a hoot. So if you're ever looking to show someone some inspiration of what can be done with an iPad and what can be done with multiple switch access, this was just a fun way to go. So that link is in the video right here, iOS switch control with Todd. And finally, I put in another link. This is a direct link to the YouTube Apple support page. If you scroll down a little bit on the Apple page, there's a whole, I mean, they have different rows of tech or different rows of Apple info, but there's a whole row, if you scroll down a bit, called Apple Accessibility. I would recommend just watching some of these videos because I've had a lot of fun using, well, we did have some kids take selfies with voice control and with switches, but this one, Assistive Access in iOS 17, lets you set up the buttons. This is unrelated, sorry, but I just had to do a plug. There's you can set up what buttons you want, and you see how large they are and how there's only like 4 to 6 per page. It's something that we've started to set up for some of my students in the transition program who have the ability to kind of be alone, or they're starting work jobs, but they can't handle the whole functionality of a phone. This is a very nice in between. So if you want to learn about assistive access, it definitely makes things a lot easier for access. That's not switches, that's just simplifying it in general. So I added that link there. Okay. Back to switch control. Here is a list. Again, I have not tried all these, or I haven't done everything, but a list of already accessible apps. There's some from enabling devices. MarbleSoft has been around for ages. I used to buy those discs like Potato Face and Switch Kids, or Sharon Won't Share, or Everybody Has Feet. I don't know. Did anybody used to play those Switch accessible games back in the day? They're really fun. So MarbleSoft has some good, easy cause-effect activities. Judy Lynn does. The Life Tool Solutions and Inclusive TLC are good. We do have some apps like the just the big bangs and patterns and stuff. Help Kids Learn. One of my schools has a license, like a subscription to this, and it has a lot of cause-effect activities. L3 Skills is a part of News to You, who does a unique learning system. I don't know if any schools use that, but I'd say within the last, I don't know, 5 years, they made L3 Skills, and there's a lot of switch accessible activities on there. I'm glad somebody said Help Kids Learn. They like it too. And here's a mention, RJ Cooper, I guess, has a couple too. And then, of course, there's communication devices. Now, I put a big old smiley face next to the Go Talk Now, because I'm going to show you how easy it is to program the Go Talk Now for scanning a communication device. And it's been a very good middle ground training sort of activity. I have a lot of kids who can do one step, cause effect. They can do 2 switches for a different function. But when we're starting to try to get the move, select, or next, select, the move or the get, or use whatever vocabulary you want, the Go Talk Now has been my easiest to program. and really good for errorless learning. So I'm going to actually end with showing you guys that. Again, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but just please refer back. If you have some students who need some cause effect activities, go to any of these websites and see if there's something that meets your needs. But are you looking for something more? I feel like I'm an infomercial. We have those students where the built-in accessibility features aren't there. And those simple cause effect, boom, you hit it, there's a firework. Boom, you hit it, there's a firework. Or you go a little swoosh and butterflies fly. I don't know if anybody's seen some of those, but sometimes you need more than those simple cause effect. So what we've started to do is program our iPad so that you can turn the pages of a book or something more. So hopefully you guys are here to learn something more. And how do we do that? Custom gestures and recipes. Let's bring it all together. So remember in the very beginning, I showed you the end game. Here's the video again of all my teachers had to do was watch a 1-minute video so that they could triple click to turn on switch accessibility. And it was already pre-programmed so that the kids could turn the pages of the book. And they loved it. Here, what else can we do? Here's a video with a little problem solving in it. This is the other video I sent out to teachers.
Once you use your QR code to access L3 skills, you'll see a variety of single switch cause and effect activities and games. In order to access these games, plug in your adapter and your Hitch 2. Make sure you select the appropriate mode so that you are on the orange level. We are going to plug the switch into the first hole, which will indicate the orange up arrow. This is like a point to the iPad, which will function as a tap the middle of the screen. Once your hardware is all set, go ahead and select a preferred game. Once the game loads, go ahead and triple click the home button on the iPad. The triple click will launch the accessibility shortcuts. There you will see the ability to start guided access or switch control. Right now we are going to start the switch control. You will then see a small box that pops up that lets you know your iPad Basics switch control has been activated. Once that is set, you are ready to go and your student is ready to play their game. Go ahead and just hit the switch, which will start the game.
I left this in on purpose.
If there is an issue, feel free to unplug the switch and replug it in, which is the best way to troubleshoot any issues with the switch control.
And then it worked that time. And that's it. On the L3 skills, the thing has to quit talking before the prompt comes up to hit your switch. So you can't just go tap, 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 tap. It has to finish talking first. So that's what the rest of the video talks about. But that, again, it is that easy for our staff or parents to use. With a quick video home, anybody was able to utilize this. So this is what I sent out to the teachers. I showed them a picture of the setup. Here's some single switch activities. That was my video, another video, and then a few different ways that they could do the books. And this handout was kind of all they needed, which was nice. Okay, so that's what the teacher saw, but that's not what we did. Let me show you now. Let's pull the curtain back. Let's jump right in and peek behind that curtain and see what programming it actually needs to take place. I'm going to show you a quick example video of me doing it and talking through. Again, this was during COVID, so I was just like recording myself doing it. It's not the best, but don't worry. Right afterward is another set of written directions. So you can watch the video to do the programming on your own, or you can just go back and follow the written directions. So just give them both a chance. What I'm going to do now is show you a recipe. The recipes on an iPad is a set of recorded gestures or a series of gestures that you can put together. So the one I'm going to show, the iPad Switch Basics, we have one recipe, includes the left swipe, the right swipe, and the tap the middle of the screen. And I link all those together so that anytime the parent or the teacher turns on switch access, they could access all three of those functionalities. There are some settings. If you look in, you can have recipes like turn off on their own or this or that. We didn't. This is just information for you. So this is what it looks like in real life, the programming.
This is a tutorial in switch accessibility via the Hitch 2 and a 3-port lightning adapter. In order to create switches and accessibility on the iPad, we must first start with the settings. Go ahead to accessibility on the left-hand side and go into switch control. Switch control must be in the off position when you're adding switches and programming. Go ahead and click on switches and you will add a new switch. I'm currently using the Hitch 2 in the orange row, which will be the up arrow, the left arrow, and the right arrow. This will make more sense later based upon what we are programming. To add the switches, you hit external and you activate your external switch. First, I'm going to do orange up arrow. Go ahead and label it based upon the switch interface. So I'm going to name it orange up. You must select something under System, select Tap, and continue the process, repeat the process for the other two switches. Add a new switch, external, activate. I'm going to activate orange left right there. And save. Press Tap again and add a new switch, and I'm going to do orange right arrow. So external, activate your switch and name it orange right. Click Tap again. Once you have all your switches added, you can then back out of the switches and we are going to create a recipe. When you enter into recipes, you will see there are some standard recipes already created. However, they don't involve all of the actions that we need, so we're going to create a new recipe. I'm going to name this recipe iPad Basics. As you can see, a single tap did not allow a keyboard to pop up. You can either double tap, remove the actual attachment, or press the keyboard down here. So I'm going to name this iPad Basic Switches. And then I'm going to assign an action to each of those switches. So for this example, we're doing tapping middle of the screen, turning pages of a book back and forward. So in my mind, it makes the most sense on the orange left arrow, since it's pointing to the left, that makes sense to move the pages of the book back. So I'm going to take the orange left arrow, and to move the pages of a book back, you swipe left to right. So I'm going to put in the left to right swipe. I'm going to assign another switch to turn pages forward. You go to the right, so in order to turn them forward, you need to swipe from the right to left. So the orange right arrow is going to be a right to left swipe that will move our book forward. And then the up arrow is kind of like a pointing, and that I'm going to use the up arrow as tap middle of the screen. You can assign any switches, any names to any function. This just made the most sense for those actions, and we were trying to make this as easy as possible for each student's assistants, parapros, teachers, parents, and just kind of make it a little more foolproof. So that is why we decided to go orange up, left, and right as our recipe. We want ours to be the timeout to be turned off. We do not want this recipe to time out or to turn off after a period of time, so the timeout is turned off. The next thing we need to check is actually launch recipe. So back out of the recipe, click launch recipe, and we want the iPad Basic switches to launch every time we turn on switch control. We don't want the standard two-step switch scanning to launch. We want this special recipe with our special assignments to be launched in order to use the switches.
Okay. And that is how it works. So a couple questions that you may have from this is why swipe and tap? I sort of explained it in there. This was just gave the most amount of access with simple commands. This was, again, one of our COVID things, so it was something we could send home. The tap middle of the screen worked on Help Kids Learn. It worked on the L3 skills. It worked with so many things. And every student during the day could get to Epic Books where they could swipe back and forth. So they were good cause effect type activities that our students could all access. And again, more than just boom, firework, boom, firework. It gave a little more variety in what we could do. All right, I did why 3 switches, you may ask. Our students could only use 1 or 2 switches at a time. Most of my students only use 1 or 2 switches at a time. But doing all that background programming at once made it so easy that the caregiver or teacher could just switch where the switch, change the location of where the switch was plugged into just to get different functionality. They didn't have to go into the programming of the iPad. They didn't have to change anything. All they had to do is change where the actual switch was plugged in to get the different functionality based upon that. And then the timeout, I mentioned we don't want the recipe to turn off. For my students that were utilizing this for accessibility, they didn't have the ability to wake up iPads on their own, or they didn't have the ability to do all the other neat functions that the iPad Switch Accessibility has. We needed them just to stay locked into this switch programming, which gave them the most functionality. They were never utilizing their iPad alone. It was always with some sort of adult support or some sort of setup to begin with. One question was, yes, it will work on an iPad Pro. It's just the USB-C connector. All the links I gave you were for the regular Lightning adapters, but the same things were true and worked with the USB-C. I did have the single camera app with the USB-C for the Don Johnston, and I bought the 3-prong with the USB-C connection for the Hitch 2. And these did work with my iPad Pro. So I tried them, I promise. And then somebody else added gingertiger.net's also a newer Switch Access site. That's fun. I'll add it to my list. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to keep doing more because that was like kind of my iPad basic switch interaction. I actually went a little crazy above and beyond and did some crazy stuff. So let me show you a few more videos just to kind of hopefully blow your mind. Sorry, I keep saying, it's not very speech therapist of me. So hard to do blank faces. That's okay. Here's the actual written out directions. If you are more a visual learner instead of the auditory learner, this says go to accessibility, hit on switch control, click the switches, add new switch, external. And here are the notes, like make sure your Hitch 2 or Don Johnson switch interface is on the correct level. You know, if the switch isn't working, unplug and plug it in again. To activate your switch, and this is a huge one, you name it based on the information from the switch interface, like orange up or left or right, or green enter or green space. Don't actually name it on the color of the switch because this doesn't mean anything. What means something is the keyboard function you're teaching to the iPad. So name it based upon what the switch interface says. So hopefully that makes sense to you when I say name it based on the switch interface, not the color of the switch itself. So then depending on the orientation of your iPad, if you're side versus landscape versus portrait, you might have to unplug it and plug it in again. And then right after you program the switch, you have to click on something. So I have always just clicked on the tap. I don't know why, but it's always worked for me. It's never been an issue. That's just what I do. So that's what I recommend. And then we can do the fun stuff. We can create the recipes. So plan what you want. Like initially I showed the swipe left, right, and tap middle of the screen, but you can give a million others. So this is the directions based upon the video I just showed you of how to program the tap middle screen, left, right swipe. So that's just the written out directions. The last step, and I'll show you the video for that really quick, is that you want to make the accessibility shortcut so that you can just tap that home button 3 times. Or on iPad Pro, you tap the power button 3 times because iPad Pro doesn't have a home button. So it's the same exact thing, just a tap 3 times on the home button. Oh, and I put that right there. So on the new iPads like the Pro, it's actually the sleep wake button. And here's the last little bit of the programming just to show you in a video where to do the triple click accessibility feature.
accessibility down at the bottom, I'm going to do accessibility shortcuts, and I want to make sure switch control is checked, and I also typically have guided access on for my students. That way, when we are out in an app or anywhere in the iPad, you can triple click and you will see that your iPad configuration, that your switch control is turned on and off. So a triple click will turn it on and launch the recipe you wanted, and a triple click will turn it off. That way, when you go into any app, you will see that when you do the arrow up, you'll see a tap middle of the screen. When you do the arrow to the left, you'll see a swipe, and arrow to the right, you'll also see a swipe. So those are the finger movements that these 3 switches are now programmed for. So those could be used in a variety of apps depending what your need is for that given app. Accessibility.
Okay. So, now's the fun part. Advanced programming. How many switches can we really add? What can we really make it do? Again, here's my infomercial. Here's your issue. What can we do? The Hook Plus can give you 4 different functions. Again, in the programming, I just showed you 3. We're tapping middle of the screen and we're swiping left and right. So that was 3, which is plenty for most chunk of my students. But what can we do? Hook Plus can do 4. The Bluetooth can do 6 very easily. If you program the Bluetooth, you can do up to 10. Okay, the Don Johnson Switch Interface Pro, for all those who answered yes, that you already own it, there are 18 programmable switches. For those of you who don't own it or can't find one, I'm really sorry that it doesn't exist. But you can purchase the Hitch 2, which will give you 6 easy functions. And then again, if you program the last row on it, you can get up to 11. So I'm showing everybody the videos with the Hitch 2 because that is something that you can still purchase. It's commercially available. But again, the same thing is true with the Don Johnson Switch Interface. You can program every keyboard function, and the Bluetooth can do 6 different keyboard functions. So this is how you program the Bluetooth to use the extra modes. For example, right now you can do the space and the enter can be programmed, the 1 and the 3, and I think even your this level, but mode number 4, like level number 4 that has the left and right mouse click, you can't program those because the iPad doesn't register mouse clicks as a programmable function. So the first 3 modes are the ones there. If you want to program more, if you have the Bluetooth, you can look at this, but don't look at this unless it's relevant to you because it's extra. The Hook Plus, it's just listed again. The 4 switches can be added manually. The Don Johnson, everything is programmable on the Don Johnson except the red and yellow click. So the up, down, left, right, enter, space, enter, tab, shift, tab, backspace, 1, 2, 3, 0, and function 3, F5, F7, F8. All of those. So everything except the red and yellow click can be turned into an actual iPad function. And on the Hitch, it says on the green level, it's the space and the enter, and on the orange level, it's the up, down, and left and right. So those are your options of what you can use to program. Okay, so if you are going to do some custom gestures and recipes, and this is the really fun part, you really have to plan ahead of time and think about what you want to accomplish. Like choose the right app and activity. You're never going to be able to make every app completely accessible. So sometimes just pick and choose. Like as a therapist, I would say, you know, some things I would use partner assisted scanning, or I'd use eye gaze for them to make a choice, but then they use their switch to actually select it or to turn to the next page, you know, kind of use it as a more interactive activity. I like to recommend looking for an app where the student would only have to do 2 to 6 different movements to be able to interact with it. And then, like I said, utilize eye gaze or communication device for other choices. You can combine a couple of movements into a custom gesture. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let me just kind of jump into it, but just know that you do have to write down what you actually do and kind of like write a script so that you know what level can actually program everything. And here is how I do it. Just as before, you add all your switches in. But then once you have switches, here's my fun secret. the extra overlay from laminate.
Custom gestures in your recipes is where switch accessibility gets really fun. The first step is to plan. Basically, that's what I have to emphasize. Go ahead and pick any app. Any app, whether it be Fruit Ninja for swiping that you would need to access, maybe a spin art app where you have to pick a color, paint, press the spinning to go, even something like this, Paint Party. This is a makeup based app that I just thought would be fun for one of our students if it's something of their interest. Determine first what the app requires to be successful. In this app, you must take soap, wash the face, you need to take a brush and brush the hair. Practice the app and go through the movements to determine what's necessary. Once you decide what your finger is actually doing, for example, picking the green face mask and putting it on, determine where your finger, the path that your finger took. You then need to take either some overhead projector or some laminate. I'm personally using the leftover laminate. And you need to practice and look and decide where your finger starts. You can use it with the laminate on, which is very nice. And you need to actually make the marks to say, make sure I go here, start here, and draw the path of what it takes for the app to be successful. This is very important when we're creating custom gesture. So once you have your overlays made, this overlay was made for the first 3 and 4 directions to this app, and this is now directions 4 through 6. Always make sure you place a little circle around the home button so you know which way is up and down, because later you might get yourself in a wrong orientation. Once you have your plans created, go ahead to settings. Make sure you have all your switches entered. Right now I have the 6 switches entered for the Hitch 2, and I am going to go and create a recipe. This is going to be a new recipe. I'm going to name it Makeup, just so it makes sense to me. And then we are going to assign switches. The first set I'm going to do is just the green row because it's on top of my Hitch 2. So the space green enter. So the green space, I'm going to make that number 1. Now, I don't need it to tap the middle of the screen or left and right swipe. I actually need a custom gesture. So click on custom gesture, go ahead and put your overlay down and create the number 1 custom gesture. And you will see that as you do a custom gesture, your finger, whatever you trace for your finger, will be traced, and that will become the custom gesture. That will be exactly the same movement that the iPad executes when you hit that switch. So that's number 1, and that's that custom gesture. Let's do the next one. So I'm going to do the green enter. That's number 2. So I need to go over here to number 2, create another custom gesture. And number 2 was grabbing something, I believe it was like the brush, and we go back and forth and we brush our hair. So that is now, you see exactly what my finger did is what's being traced by the iPad. Go ahead and save that. And I'm going to do another one. Number 3, I can't remember what that was. Oh, it's putting cucumbers on the eye, so I'm going to do the orange up arrow because that's the next one. I'm going to create another custom gesture. And I'm going to go grab 1 cucumber and grab another cucumber. And those will be the 2 cucumbers on her eye. And I'm going to save that.
So that's the programming. I mean, that really just with an overlay and a permanent marker, you can start to make everything accessible. Now, as discussed, you can't make this whole app, you cannot make everything accessible. But let's say there's 10 minutes of free time, and maybe we program the first thing in the top left corner of every one of the makeup things for the student, and then her peer support or somebody else, or during social work or whatever activity, other people can use other turns. So sometimes you just be choosy about what you want to make accessible as you go. Okay, so here's the directions to this. And again, I just put in caps, like write down what you're doing, because as you can see, there is a lot to it. Now, I did not do any of this programming on any of my student iPads. This programming to make that particular app accessible was just on mine, or the speech therapist or the social worker's iPad, so that they could use it as an interactive activity. Most of the activities or most of the programming we have on the student iPad is just those more functional tap middle of the screen and swipe left and right. So again, here's the directions for what I just showed you, and what it looks like in nature or in reality. I also put here, this is what it looks like once it's programmed. I actually left in some of the errors so that you could see some of the things I had to troubleshoot. I redid this video right away and I was like, no, actually I want to leave in the one that got messed up so that you can see some of the mistakes or the pitfalls. Just again, learn from my mistakes. That's what I'm here for.
Let's go ahead and test our custom recipe and custom gestures. So when we click the green space, that'll be our first one. That will be our soap. Let's test it. It swipes down and around. Very nice. Let's test our next one. That will be the brush. That was our green enter. Fabulous. We checked her off. Let's test number 3, which was our orange up. I'm currently changing the level on the hitch 2 so that I can do orange up, which is the cucumbers. As you can see, I was a little high on my grab of the cucumbers. So that is a recipe, a custom gesture I will need to re-record. I may even just want to check my overlay. See, I must have grabbed just a little further off. I need to grab a little further down, so you could make a little note on your overlay to go right underneath the 3. And that's something you can re-record. But as you go through, you'll see that all these custom gestures are recorded and you're able to complete just about any app.
All right. So again, things to remember when you're doing all this programming is that switch control should be turned off. Make sure you name the switches based on the switch interface, not the actual color of the button. You can if the switch isn't registering, you unplug it and plug it in again. That I showed you in one of the videos. And think about, you can only launch one recipe at a time. So if you want the student to have a whole lot of functionality, program everything in the same recipe, like the left, right swipe and the tap is all in one recipe. So that they can do all of it just based upon where they plug the switch in. Make sure you turn on the accessibility shortcut. Oh yeah, in the past, I haven't tried this lately with the new iOS, but if the iPad fell asleep, sometimes the switches act a little funky, so I just had to unplug it and plug it in again. So just teaching that little bit of troubleshooting is handy. And then remember, if you want to, you can assign a long press to each switch to do a whole nother function. So that's just a list of fun stuff. And I like to say, oh, the places you'll go. There's just so many possibilities. For example, I did a spin art. We programmed a spin art activity for one of my art teachers. Definitely books. People were really into those Tokaboka apps like the cooking or the monsters. It's really good for some social interaction and play. Oh, and another fun one. We used one of those mounts on one of my power wheelchair students. And if you program one of your switches to be a volume up button, it will actually take pictures on the iPad. So we put the iPad in the mount, the student went around and he hit a switch, which was volume up, and it would take pictures as he went. So that was just a fun way for him to take pictures of something related to whatever activity we were talking about in the classroom. Okay, in my last 30 seconds, sorry, I have to talk really fast. The reason we're throwing all this out is like, what's our goal? Some students are at the single switch cause effect activity, and that's kind of their goal. But here is a progression from Linda Burkhart's stepping stones chart that we've kind of utilized. We try to teach single switches with cause effect. Once that's mastered, we look for different locations. We like to do 2 switches with different functions. And then here, step 4, 5, and 6, learning 2 switches with the step scanning, like move, 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 get, or errorless learning, or even getting to a certain target. That's what I had a hard time teaching some of my students because there weren't a lot of games or activities. So what I ended up doing is using the Go Talk Now app. It's from Attainment Company. And this programming even works on the light version. Now, the light version, the free version of the Go Talk Now app only lets you create 5 different pages, where the full version lets you create an unlimited number of pages, which I think it's only $50 or $100, depending upon when you buy it. So it's not the most expensive communication app by any means. But what I've done is, if you take your, the AbleNet, sorry, the Hitch, if you take your Hitch 2 and you just program it space enter, you don't create any recipes, you don't do anything crazy, you just add the switches of space and enter. So you go to switches, add the switch, external switch, and you have it on green space and green enter, and you press the little tap, and then you back out. You do nothing else other than that. You can use an iPad for some of that errors learning. So right here, it's hard to see, but I have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on here. So if I press my green switch, I'm scanning through 2, 3, 4, 5, back to 1, and then my red switch is programmed as the enter to select. So it just goes through. Oh, sorry, it went to the home button. This is a way to make it kind of errorless learning. You can put different it just said 2. You can put different like snack activities on, or just anything. It's truly just my kind of small stepping stone to get students to scanning for a communication device. So here's the directions to do that. So program the switch, make sure the Hitch 2 is on the green level. And that, again, you just program the space, the green space and the green enter, and click the tap and you're done. And then you go to your Go Talk Now app, and all you have to do is go into the app, into the settings, and you say scanning, and you click on space enter. And then the green space is the mover and the green enter is the getter. And that's all you have to do. So things you could do, I've programmed it with numbers 0 through 9, snack choices, center choices, pictures of peers. Like when it's time to break up, your student can go next, 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 select. No matter what he that's like kind of the errorless. You're selecting one of your peers. So it doesn't matter. Maybe it's not his favorite person, but that's some of that errorless learning. I've also created a whack-a-mole game where you're actually doing it for an actual choice. So you make one page and have like anywhere from 4 to 49 cells on it, and just put one target cell, like a funny picture or recorded sound or video, something motivating. And then you go in and you create a copy of that page, and every copy of the page you move it. So even though it takes programming on us in the background, maybe you have to make 6 or 8 pages, copies of it, and switch the location every time. What it looks like for the student is they click a button, like the whack-a-mole, you whack here, you whack there, you whack there. They click the button, they get a reward. The next page that pops up is, the reward is in a different location. So you whack that one. The next time it pops up, it's over here. So it really gets them to alternate, to switch scan through to get to the desired location. So that using this process is how we've kind of accomplished steps 4 through 6. 4, 5, and 6, we found a lot of luck using the Go Talk Now app, which has been kind of nice. Good intermediary. Again, it's my favorite mount, so I put it in because I use it for everything. And really, I know I just threw a million things at you, but really you just got to give it a whirl. Take these directions, put them down right next to you, get an iPad next to you, and just try it. And if it doesn't work, there's my email. I'll help you out. Any questions? I know I just threw a bajillion things at you. Sorry, I have 5-year-olds, so the word bajillion is a real word in my vocabulary, in my vernacular.